Hello and welcome to It'll Be Alright in the 90s, a podcast that will always pay its respects to the fallen legends of the 90s, which is something we'll be doing later today with the episode. But before we get to that, how are you, Stu?
I'm very somber today. It's a somber occasion. I feel as if I'm at a wake. We are not so much mourning the loss of, but celebrating the life of children's ITV, particularly in its glory days for me in the 1990s. And I am going to try and prove to you tonight that CITV was equal to, if not better than, CBBC.
Well, it's going to be a very tough task. I wondered why you were wearing a black suit, but I guess it makes sense now.
And I've got the black armband on the black suit as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I couldn't see that because of the colours. But
I should have maybe worn a grey suit, and then you would have been able to see it. I don't know.
Well, you were emotional. Like you weren't thinking necessarily as rationally as usual. So fair enough. Before we get to that, though, today's episode is sponsored by Mothercare. So for all of you new or expectant parents out there, make the most of this offer by going down to your local branch of Mothercare and quoting the code ALLRIGHT90s to get a £5 gift voucher to spend on anything in store. So whether it's clothing, cots or comforters you're after, Mothercare has got what you need. So thank you very much to this episode's sponsor, Mothercare.
Great deal. Thanks so much to Mothercare for helping us out. Fond memories of their flagship Bath store. And of my mum reading Practical Parenting magazine as well. So that memory seems to go hand in hand with trips to Mothercare when I was very young. Yeah, I remember a few issues of that hanging around the house. So I don't know whether she bought the magazine at Mothercare. Maybe she did. Don't know. But
I reckon it probably had some vouchers in the back, didn't it? Discount vouchers. Of course. Cut them out and then headed down there. And...
Yeah. Makes complete sense.
Time now for the mailbag. We have a few things in this week, actually. A few things from all our various channels, whether that's social media or... Well, actually, no, they are our channels, aren't they, social media? They think they're all coming from social media. And this first one actually comes from YouTube. It's a comment under one of our recent episodes, I think, Films on 93. Apologies to Channel Nem here who made this comment. And of course, as usual, we haven't come across it for a good few weeks. So I'm only just reading it out, but we will always get to your messages eventually. That's the main policy we try to adhere to, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we just don't have the staff in the office. I mean, you heard about how Jeff's doubling up all over the place in various different roles, and he's fitting in being a full-time Freemason as well. So it's no wonder that we're drowning in the backlog, but we will try our best.
Yeah. So Neil from Channel M, this is in relation to our most 90s slang word discussion that we had around this time. And he says, the most 90s slang word for me is chava, which is another word for chav, but used in the northeast of England. It seems to be used less and less now, with the word chav taking its place. Can remember this starting to be used when I was in secondary school around 95 to 96-ish. I mean, chav, obviously a maligned word generally these days for good reason, I think, but chava, a sort of regional variation. I'm always interested in regional variations of anything to do with language, so that's a good one there. Interesting to hear that.
Thanks, Nem. Can you let us know what you called 40/40 in, by the way, up your way, please? Because that's another one that we're interested in.
I wonder if it's Relievo, because husband of the pod, Craig, called it Relievo, but he's from Newcastle, which is a very different part of the northeast, and I would never ever want to conflate the two. But that would be my guess. But yeah, do let us know, Neil. He also says, Jurassic Park was the first movie I was allowed to go to the cinema on my own without anyone's parents and just my mates. The main thing which stood out for me was the movie reel went wrong and the picture flipped and started showing the film upside down. It happened just as the kids had entered the kitchen when they were running away from the raptors. I just thought it was part of the movie and it was some sort of anti-gravity room. My friends obviously took the mick when I told them this, but come on, it's a movie about a dinosaur theme park with real-life dinosaurs, yet an anti-gravity seems too far-fetched. I mean...
I love a good cinema error. I think I've mentioned before about the power cut during Mrs. Doubtfire that my mum experienced.
Yeah.
But you got to adapt. You just, you get up, you turn your head upside down until the picture rights itself. You can't let anything get in the way of the movie, surely.
Especially not a movie like that.
Absolutely.
He also says on this was a different episode, our birthday episode, I think. He says, congrats and belated happy birthday. Well, happy second birthday. I must say I'm going to spam the poo out of your comment section over here on YouTube for each new podcast release, just so I can make the 3rd year anniversary honours list. We always appreciate spam on our YouTube videos because we won't see them for
keep it
between
there.
3 and 6 months. So spam away. What have you got over there, Stu?
Well, I have got a message from our correspondent, Stu Zanoni. Always good to hear from another Stu when we're getting correspondence in. He says, "Hi guys, love the podcast. Thank you very much. Listened to A Fleet of Dolphins today, and I think that was our best games of 90 to 94 episode. Was it, if I remember rightly, with the episode title?"
It makes me think of Echo the Dolphins, so that would make sense. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Anyway, he goes on to say, "I wasn't too sure if you knew about this Amiga. I grew up with the Amiga myself and absolutely loved it. It turns out they made a mini one last year, which I got as a Christmas present. It comes with 25 games built in, but I ended up buying a pre-installed USB from Etsy with about 500 games on it for a tenner. I thought it might be of interest. Keep up the good work." So thanks very much for getting in touch, Stu. Alex, as the Amiga file amongst us, if I can use that term, how are you taking this news?
Well, this is very exciting. I was aware of it. This was something that me and brother of the pod. Speaking of which, I've been thinking we just can't shake the title brother of the pod. I know he's actually not that anymore. He's legend of the pod.
Mm-hmm.
But it's fine. I'm finding it so hard to shake. I'm wondering if actually he should hold 2 positions. You know how like military leaders will have different ribbons and and maybe it is okay to have 2 positions, and he would be brother and legend, but we refer to him as brother of the pod. Just, I mean, maybe I'm just being lazy because I can't change out of my ways. But this is a podcast about specifically not changing out of your ways. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll have to check the Constitution, and then if it's constitutionally legal, we'll have to put it through the board of directors, won't we?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I've never seen the board of directors. I don't know. I don't know what they look like. I don't know what their names are. All I know is that we have a board of directors who sort of oversee our output.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll have to get in touch with them if we want to do that. So.
Yeah, good point. Okay, we'll put that to them, and we'll find out what they say.
One more thing before we move on from Stu's message. In his Twitter biography, he rather enigmatically describes himself as an Ashford United FC record holder. Now, as a bit of a non-league fanatic, I'm very interested in this, Stu. So when you get around to hearing the episode, let us know specifically what record you hold at Ashford United FC, please, whether it's most appearances, most goals scored. I would definitely like to know more. Please do let us know, mate.
Some correspondence here on our What's the Most 90s children's book. It's one message on our Instagram from 90s Nostalgia Nook, a friend of ours on Instagram, who says simply, Harry McClary from Donaldson's Dairy. And is that a book or a character from a book?
Harry McClary is a very famous children's book. Yeah, I remember that being around at primary school, very much so.
Yes, there you go. Well, that's a good bit of input on What's the Most 90s children's author. And also, we asked the question, what's the most 90s holiday destination, some episodes back, and we've had some correspondence on Instagram again. Ben Woodhouse says Disneyland Paris, before brother of the pod, Adam, corrects him and says, I think you mean Euro Disney. And that then descended into some unpleasantness, which we won't go into now. But, of course, for authenticity, it should be Euro Disney. But Ben Woodhouse, it's a good shout. Definitely a very 90s holiday destination. Friend of the pod, Susie Thorpe, says, we never went abroad in the 90s. It was always the £5 Sun newspaper caravan holidays for us. I guess my 90s destination would have to be Cornwall. You know, nothing wrong with that.
No, absolutely.
Family destination in the 90s was very much Pembrokeshire. So, yeah, lovely stuff. And then, here comes brother of the pod again. After savaging Ben Woodhouse, he says, of his own volition, how about following the herd down to Greece? Brackets, looking for girls who want boys, who like boys to be girls, who do boys like their girls, who do girls like their boys. Which is, of course, a reference to a classic Blur song, Girls and Boys. And finally, Big Tim Parker, legend of the pod, says Ibiza or Ayia Napa, which is a good shout. I think the end of the 90s into the early 2000s definitely was big for like Ayia Napa and Ibiza with all that, the dance music generation and the beginning of UK Garage and whatnot. So some great input there from everyone.
I know that Big Tim was a regular visitor to those parts when he was 13 in the year 1999. So,
absolutely, yeah. Well, he of course frequents the Ibiza event they hold at Bowood House in
Yes.
Wiltshire every July, I believe. He's always down there in his fold-out chair with his glow sticks.
Nothing says I was a child in the 90s and attending a classic Ibiza event with a fold-up chair in tow, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
I have some correspondence from regular correspondent and listener Tom Page. Now, this is something special, and I think this is going to start something which is going to be rolling on the podcast for episodes to come. He quite simply has sent through a picture, and I'm going to read to you what it says. It's a slip of paper, and it says at the top, "The Clark's Shop, 25 Emery Gate, Chippenham, Wiltshire." It goes on to give the address. And what we have, if you haven't already guessed, is a receipt from Clark's, the shoe shop, from their Chippenham branch. And this is dated the 24th of December, 1996. Oh. So this is some late Christmas shopping going on in the Page household. He told me he found this in the bottom of the carrier bag that he keeps all of his other carrier bags in. He said, so clearly this carrier bag has been around for a long time. The till assistant on the day was called Joyce Ives. And whoever was at the till on that day spent £31.25, £30 on a pair of shoes, and then £1.25 on a pair of insoles. And this is 11 minutes past 10 in the morning on Christmas Eve, 1996. And it does say at the bottom, please keep your receipt. And they've stayed true to that for 27 years. Yeah. So there you go. Just in case those shoes need to go back, we've got the paperwork. So. Yeah. What I want to put to the listeners is this. What are your old receipts from the 90s? Have you got any hanging around? What did you buy? What were the prices like? Where did you go? What were the till assistants called? Because that's something else I think has died out, is having the name of the assistant that served you printed on the receipt. You don't see that a lot anymore, I don't think. Yeah. So if anybody's got any receipts hanging around from the 90s, please do take a picture, send them in. We would love to see those. I mean, we would love to see what's the oldest one we can get as well. If we can get one from January the 1st, 1990, absolutely superb. So yeah, please do have a route around in your old carrier bags and let us know what you find.
That would be fantastic. We can start a hashtag 90s receipts and see if we can go viral. It's about bloody time this podcast went viral. For the right reasons anyway. And also, Joyce Ives, if you're listening, please do contact us and let us know how that transaction went, if there were any memories related to it, and how your Christmas went. But yeah, we definitely want your receipts. So
did you have to use that contraption for measuring the shoe size during the transaction? Did you have to get the foot in there and tighten it up with the little slide? And
yeah. So many details that we'd love to know more about.
I'll tell you what I'd like to know more details about, Alex.
Oh, here we go.
I've got one word for you.
Yeah.
Kaugummi.
Oh, don't. Shivers down my spine. Oh, what?
Now, I happened to see a little Facebook interaction over the weekend between yourself and your old languages teacher. Is that correct?
Yes, it happened. I was contacted by a fellow alumni of Corsham School, Year 7 specifically, Carl Thornhill, sent me a video that's doing the rounds, I think, on Instagram at the moment of a German sort of educational pop song.
Englisch ist mein Lieblingsfach, Lieblingsfach, Lieblingsfach. Was ist dein Lieblingsfach? Englisch oder was?
Turnen ist mein Lieblingsfach, Lieblingsfach, Lieblingsfach. Was ist dein Lieblingsfach? Turnen oder was?
Presumably, he remembered us doing it in class. And then this reminded me of a song that we performed in Year 7 called Kaugummi, which is, of course, German for chewing gum, which any Year 7 German class attendees will remember. And it just, it took me back to a time when I was, well, love is a strong word. I had a very strong, warm feelings towards my German teacher and also tutor. She was also our tutor, Miss Gutman, Bryony Gutman, best teacher I have ever had. Very much my Mr. Bergstrom of school. And yes, she convinced us, or some of us in the class, to take part in I don't know what it was. It was some sort of showcase. I don't know if it was just related to languages. I think it was probably everything, but different people from Year 7 in different classes would perform different things in the school hall. It was an after school thing, an evening thing. So parents would have been there. Which she convinced us somehow, I guess she convinced me because I just would do anything she said, to perform a song called Kaugummi, with full actions, dressed up, each of us in a different colour. I can still remember, well, the main action, which will not be any good on this audio podcast, but we did it, and I've never quite shaken off the full body shudders that I had throughout it, and ever since. It was just one of those things that, you know, you get swept up in when you're in year 7 and you're young and you're malleable, and you'll do whatever your favourite teacher says. So yeah, it all came flooding back when I saw that original video posted by Kyle, and then yeah, Miss Gutman herself did get in touch on Facebook and just said hello, which was nice.
Well, I mean, if Miss Gutman listens to the pod, maybe we can ask her to make a guest appearance at some point, and we can have a little chat about teaching at Corsham School in the 90s. I mean, we've spoken often enough about being a pupil there in the decades, so why not from the other side of it? Why not from the teaching side?
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Yeah, get in touch, Bryony, if you do listen. Feels weird calling her Bryony. Miss Gutman.
Cowgummy, Cowgummy, Alan Morgan, Cowgummy, Cowgummy.
How do you know it?
We're Alan Morgan, Cowgummy.
You weren't there, were you?
I did it in year 7 as well, mate.
Oh, okay, thank God.
There was also a song. Did you do Ich habe ein Pony?
Oh, that sounds familiar, yeah.
Yeah. Ich habe ein Pony. Ich habe zwei Pudel. I tell you what, Alex Mitchell's going to be going absolutely mad right now. Ich habe 3 Hunde. Ich habe 4 Katze.
Yes,
Ich habe 5 Fische. Ich habe 6 Vögel. Ich habe 7. No, it's 7 Katzen. I don't know what wir is then. 7 Katzen. Ich habe 8 Kaninchen, which I think is budgies. Ich habe 9 Mäuse. Ich habe 10 Meerschweinchen.
Listeners, he's doing the actions
Ich
now.
habe 11. Oh, bollocks. What was 11? And it was then 12. No, I can't remember 11 and 12. Oh, that's a shame.
Is that still in your set?
Yeah, still doing that now.
Yeah,
Yeah. Just as a sound check, though, you know. Time now for What's the Most 90s. And Alex, this time, I want to know, and when you're in the edit suite, when I do this, can you put an echo on my voice, and can we have a thunderclap after I finish the sentence, please? Do you reckon you can manage that?
I'll see what I can do.
Okay. I would like to know, what is the most 90s act of God?
Good question. I've been waiting for you to ask this, actually, because I have the answer already from before we even started doing this pod. I know the answer to this. I wouldn't be surprised if you have the same thing. Well, actually, I've gone for a general thing rather than a specific event, like a reoccurring act of God, because of course it's acid rain. Staple of geography lessons throughout the 90s. Textbooks replete with images of devastated forests in the northern hemisphere, but then seemingly just disappeared from the public consciousness and the political discourse sort of immediately after the 90s. So it literally feels like a 90s act of God, although I'm sure it was happening before. But it really was 90s, and yeah, I had that's it really. I don't have anything else to say. It's nailed on for me. Acid rain. Okay.
Well, I have gone for a singular event.
Okay. Good.
And I want to take you back to the 2nd of April, 1990. And I want to talk to you about the Bishop's Castle earthquake, which was the biggest to shake Britain for 100 years at the time, 5.1 on the Richter scale. Now, if you can stomach the awful Shropshire Star website, which is close to being absolutely unreadable, as are a lot of local news websites these days.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, guys, we just want to read the articles. Please.
Yeah.
Please, sort it out. There's a great article. I think it was written for the 30th anniversary of the earthquake a few years ago. This is undoubtedly a serious event. There were no deaths. There weren't that many injuries, so I'm comfortable talking about it here. But looking at it and looking back at the pictures and reading about it, this is about as British an act of God as you could possibly get. If you look at the article I'm looking at, there are pictures of 2 garden sheds which are upended during the earthquake. And then a little later down, there's a picture of a Morris Marina with its windscreen that's been put through by some falling debris. MAW121W. I did have a look. It was sold in August 1990 because a new logbook owner picked it up then, and it survived until May 1993. So clearly, the car emerged unscathed from the smash windscreen and went on to have a few more years on the road. One of my favourite aspects of this whole thing is the fact that they called in the 6'7" town crier, a chap called Martin Wood, who used his massive voice at the town hall to warn of dangers and give advice on public transport issues at the time. So great to see the town crier getting involved. As I said, there were no serious injuries. It's actually a really interesting read. If you do read through it, there was some fear that a newly finished shopping centre might be damaged, but it looks like it was okay. Shrewsbury railway station was evacuated and train services were delayed for 1 hour. So there we go. And I mean, you get delayed for more than an hour for something a lot less than an earthquake these days.
Yeah.
So I had no hesitation in going for the Bishop's Castle earthquake as the most 90s act of God.
Excellent. We've got a sort of two very different things there. One is an event, one is a general phenomena. So I don't really want to have to pick between those two things. They do seem almost like different things. Can they both go in the ledger? Can one be like act of God brackets specific, act of God brackets general, and then we can have both?
I mean, it's going to have to go before the board of directors again. We've never had a score draw before.
That's true. Yeah. Well, we can just put it on the agenda for their meeting, can't we? It's another thing on there. So
yeah, this is unprecedented.
To be confirmed.
Alex, I've still got a few stories on my story roulette wheel here. I've still got my biggest ever telling off at primary school. I've got our listener stats, which I've got waiting here to be examined, or I've got a few new headings here. I've got the time I was almost killed on a zebra crossing. I've got Angus Deaton's 1 foot in the groin, or I've got Big Tim Parker getting covered in shit at my house at the weekend.
Well, let's keep it topical. Let's have Big Tim Parker getting covered in shit at your house at the weekend.
Now, I know it's not a 90s event from my life in the 90s, but it does involve a legend of the pod, Big Tim Parker, who visited Casa del Joslin at the weekend in order to help me install, in order so that I could watch him install a new rainwater diverter for our water butt. This connector that we had previously hadn't been working very well. The water butt wasn't filling up. And there was actually some flooding from the guttering at the top when it rained really hard. So we suspected that the guttering was broken anyway. But I consulted with Tim and I got hold of a new diverter kit, and he said, we'll start there and we'll see how we go. He's very handy on these things. I'm very lucky to have him as a friend who'll help me out. So he very carefully sawed through the old rainwater diverter, which was really clamped into the downpipe quite hard, pulled it free, removed it, and then at that moment was sprayed with 2 years worth of backed up rainwater, which was in the downpipe because the old rainwater diverter was actually blocked and therefore not working properly. So, and that also explains why the guttering was leaking at the top, because the downpipe was actually full and there was nowhere else for the water to go. So Big Tim, I don't know if you've seen the Father Ted episode where Ted and Dougal get covered in raw sewage when the guy in the truck presses the wrong button. But that's exactly what it was like. I dived over a hedge to safety, but Big Tim took it like a man, and what can I say, just a great guy in the face of adversity. Finished the job without so much as a murmur and went home to watch the American football. So I just wanted to place on record my thanks to Big Tim for doing that, and everything out there is now working faultlessly.
Fantastic. Big Tim Parker available for all your DIY and slapstick needs.
Reasonable rates. He's under our umbrella now, so he's working for us.
Yeah,
we take a cut of anything that he earns as a sort of odd job man. Yeah.
Time to get on with the main topic at hand now then. So as mentioned earlier, we will be talking about CITV, but we have a specific approach that we're going to use for this episode. Stu, a avid viewer of CITV back in the day, whereas I was a CBBC diehard through and through. So with the demise, the very sad demise of CITV recently this year, Stu has decided or taken it upon himself to try and convince me why CITV was at least as good as, if not better than CBBC, and convert me into a fellow CITV devotee. So, Stu, I think you've got your work seriously cut out here. I won't lie, I won't sugarcoat it, but I'm open. So, what have you got to say for yourself?
Well, I've been thinking about the best way to approach this, and I thought I could just take a whistle-stop tour through the big hitters from CITV in the 90s, your Art Attacks, your Zaps, your Sabrina the Teenage Witches, your Fun Houses. But I feel like that's been done. So what I wanted to do was just take you through what a regular afternoon would have been watching CITV. I pick a random day from the 90s, random weekday afternoon, have a look at what was on that day, and then take you through my memories of those programs, try and convince you that it was worth the while. And so what I've done is I've gone for as close to the middle of the decade as I could. So these are the programs from Wednesday, the 12th of July, 1995. And I want to thank the good people at the TV and radio database for providing the listings that I've used. But before we get into this, Alex, you said you were a CBBC diehard. Was there any room for CITV in your life at all? I just want to know, before we start, what sort of level of knowledge you're at, really. You know, was there any time when you switched over to the other side for a particular program, or was it not allowed?
Well, having looked up a little bit of the history of CITV in preparation for this episode, I have realised I definitely did watch some CITV, because there were some programs. I've got a couple here that I'll maybe talk about in a little bit, but there were definitely some programs that I watched quite regularly, I'd say. So I must have switched it over. We would have the radio times at our home, so we could see, you know, what was on at different times and plan that way. So I must have watched it. Yeah, I think it was probably 80-20 in favour of CBBC. If I was going to guess, all these years later. So yeah, I definitely did watch it a little bit.
Okay, so we're not starting from a position of complete ignorance then. That's okay. I think there is some room in your heart for it. That's all right then. So, Wednesday, the 12th of July, 1995, as I said, and in the same way as CBBC worked, the afternoon would run with programs aimed at younger children first, running through the afternoon, and ending up with a program at the end which was aimed at really sort of preteen children, I would estimate. So we've got a real gamut of programs to run through here. I've got so much to talk about. I'm really looking forward to this. So first up on Wednesday, the 12th of July, 1995, was Alphabet Castle. Now, do you remember Alphabet Castle?
No, I don't think so.
You don't? Okay. So this concerned a castle in the sky called Alphabet Castle, with two main characters, Old King Alpha and Young Queen Bet. And I watched some on YouTube, and the theme tune came back to me straight away. As soon as I saw it, I was able to sing it word for word. I remember the melody, the tune, everything, despite not having seen it for about 25 years.
Is it a castle in the air? No, it's a castle here and there. Flags are flying plain to see. Alphabet Castle, A, B, C.
So even though I would have been sort of coming up for 7 years old by then, I was clearly still spending a lot of time watching things like Alphabet Castle, but that's fine. Maybe I was just a late developer. I don't know. And from the title of the program, we can surmise that every episode was focused on a different letter of the alphabet. So, they would go around talking about things beginning with O, or, I've got to make a supper, but they have to be, all the ingredients have to begin with the letter C. What have we got? Well, we've got carrots, we've got cinnamon, things like that. So a real gentle start to the afternoon with Alphabet Castle. Yeah, which I have fond memories of. I seem to remember there being, in the playground, did we maybe change the lyrics to the theme tune to something more subversive? I can't remember. I seem to remember doing that. I don't know. Matco, Joe Barter, Legend of the Pod, Joe Barter might know. So if you...
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to say, I'm concerned about the two main characters you said were Old King something and Young Queen.
Old King Alpha and Young Queen Bet. Now, this only really works with Young Queen Bet, doesn't it? I mean, King Alpha is, who's that?
Oh, I see.
What sort of a name is that? Oh, you've just got it, right?
I've only just got it. my issue was more to do with the age difference and the classic, trope of TV execs not liking older women on screen and therefore leading men being older and leading women being much younger, even if they're supposed to be like in a relationship or something. And this sounds like an early example of that. Early, I mean, age-wise.
I'm not sure about the relationship status. I think, having watched some back recently, the king was played by a younger actor who had been made to look older. So I think the actors were probably around the same age at the time.
Okay. I'm more worried about the characters than the actors, but that's fair enough. Yeah, maybe the king and the queen were of different realms, and they weren't in a relationship. They were just
possibly.
No.
Although the more I think about it, there has to be some sort of subtext, doesn't there? Which I probably missed when I was watching this back in '95. So maybe there's a YouTube deep dive coming on here. We'll have to go behind the scenes.
I didn't even get the pun on their name, so I was never going to get anything subversive going on.
I mean, that is pretty much unforgivable, I have to be honest with you.
I just thought that was their names. I bet it was a weird name, but there you go.
So I'm going to move on then. So Alphabet Castle finishes, and these are all 10-minute episodes. Alex is just blowing his nose. We'll just wait for him to finish
Have you got any bronchial balsam by any chance?
There's some in the downstairs toilet. That's where we keep all the medicine. I'll go and grab some for you later. Although what good that would do you, I'm not sure. I'll have to post it to you, wouldn't I?
Just seeing it would be enough.
Yeah, that's probably out of date. Right, so these are all 10-minute programs, by the way, until we get on to some of the later ones. So we're going on now to the first big hitter I'm going to talk about, which is Wizardora. Now, Wizardora. Exactly. You're the one who can brighten up our day.
We adore her, we adore her, doing things in her very special way. Wizardora, nothing surer, you're the one that can brighten up our day.
There you go.
Absolutely fantastic. So we're on a surer footing with Wizardora than we were with Alphabet Castle. I can tell straight away.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So I really used to enjoy this. And what I found out when doing a bit of reading up before the episode, and funnily enough, considering what we've been talking about in the intro to the pod, is that Wizardora was originally conceived as an English learning tool for German children.
Okay.
So that was how it was originally used, and then it morphed into the program that we know and love. It was actually developed by Connie Booth from 40 Towers, who played Polly in 40 Towers, and who actually wrote some later episodes as well, which I had no idea about there being a connection between one of the greatest sitcoms of all time and Wizardora. So for those of you who haven't seen it, it concerns the daily doings of Wizardora, the trainee wizard, and her many friends, chief of which is Tatty Bogle the Scarecrow, who is liable to a spoonerism now and again, so he'll get his letters mixed up on the starts of his words. And when I think about Tatty Bogle, I think of the couple of years I spent whenever my mum and dad had occasion to visit a DIY store or hardware store, and I was there. I would immediately go and try and find the replacement mop heads, and then come back and pretend to be Tatty Bogle with a mop head, nice, holding a mop head over my greasy scalp. So I'm sure whoever eventually bought that was really.
I mean, at least you're using a brand new mop head, not
true,
lying around on the shop floor.
There were a couple of other characters I'd forgotten about. Phoebe the Talking Telephone and Hangle, both of whom are frightening, I've got to be honest with you. So Phoebe is a pink anthropomorphic talking telephone of the analog type, and then Hangle is a walking, talking coat hanger, basically, who is in charge of hanging up Wizardora's magic cloaks. So it was good to make their acquaintance again.
Yeah, I mean, of all the things that I wouldn't want to be talking, the telephone would be number one, I think. Because you're trying to talk to someone else on the other end of the line, and the telephone's bloody interrupting every 5 minutes, trying to talk to you. I mean,
yeah, no, it can't have been good. It would probably only work in some sort of magical kingdom, really, wouldn't it? That's the only place it could work.
That's true.
Yeah, very, very annoying. But no, I loved Wizardora, and obviously the theme tune is an absolute classic as well. So when this came up in the listing that I looked at, I was really very pleased. So Alphabet Castle sort of mediocre start, but then I think we're really getting into our stride now with Wizardora, and it's one that you remember as well, which is really good for me in my quest to get you to recognise CITV as one of the greats. We then move on, and there is an intermission for a Warner Brothers cartoon. Now, it doesn't say which Warner Brothers cartoon it was, but any Warner Brothers cartoon is a good Warner Brothers cartoon. Am I right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So there would have been an intermission here, just a little gap, which was filled by a 5-minute, 6-minute Warner Brothers cartoon, which was always welcome. And I keep saying this on the podcast, and I'm getting bored of myself, but you don't see cartoons being used as filler on the TV anymore, and we're worse off for it. Who wouldn't want to now see, say, you know, the BBC News at 6 finishes at 6:55, the one show comes on at 7, 5 minutes, Sylvester and Tweety.
Yeah, I would love that. And you know why it is? It's because they've just filled them all with like idents and trailers for coming programs that take up at least 5 minutes. Whereas back in the day, it would just be a still, wouldn't it? It'd be a still from at 8 o'clock. It's Phil Mitchell's getting wanged down the hole in Walford, and it would just be an image of Phil and Grant having an argument, and then it would say like 8 p.m.
Grant like this.
Yeah, exactly. And that would take.
That won't work on audio, but
that won't work on audio. Should have done a screen grab.
Driving the car into the Thames. Sorry, mate. Carry
on. But that would take 10 seconds or something, and then they can move on and show the cartoon. But now they're showing 2.5 minutes of the next episode of Race Around the World. It gives away all the good bits, and like you say, we're far worse off for it.
Another thing to add to the campaign list: bring back cartoons where there's a gap in the schedule. Less idents, more cartoons. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Now we're really getting into our stride here. So we've had Wizardora, we've had the Warner Brothers cartoon, and now we come to Sooty and Co.
Hey ho, it's Sooty and Co. Everybody say hello. There's Sooty and Sweep, a panda called Sue, and little cousin Scampy too.
Now this was a massive favourite for me at this time. It's probably my favourite programme on the schedule that we're going to talk about today. The one at the end runs it a close second, but I think it has to be Sooty. And this is the incarnation of Sooty, where Matthew Corbett and the gang are running a bric-a-brac shop in Manchester, and lots of obviously hilarious things happen while they're trying to run the shop around them. Famous faces would always stop by. I remember Jack D being in one episode, and they spent the whole episode trying to get Jack D to laugh, because even then he had a reputation as being a very dour man, even though he was one of the greatest stand-up comedians of the 90s, a very, very dour man. And I think, if memory serves me, I haven't seen this since the time, but they finally get him to crack up by just custard pieing him, just throwing a custard pie into his face, and that's what finally gets him to laugh. I also believe that Sweep is one of the greatest comedy creations of the last 100 years. I genuinely believe that. I think Sweep is the MVP of any Sooty programme, and I will happily die on that hill.
It's a massive hill to die on. I'll give you that. It's a big statement, but I can't think of anyone better. So
I just love Sweep. And while he is the MVP, I have to ask you, what are your thoughts on Little Cousin Scampy?
I'm not a fan. I was never a fan of those sort of characters. Those kind of... Was he a later edition? He was. He was like a... Was he introduced in that specific iteration?
Yes.
Of
So he was the Scrappy Doo of Sooty. Yes.
Yeah, they're sort of irritating characters in real life, and they're irritating characters in, fiction and TV and whatnot. So I wasn't a big fan. No. How about you?
I don't suppose I minded him at the time. I can see why they wanted to add a sort of mischievous schoolboy character to the mix. But when you think about the programme, I don't think you remember Scampy unless you actually think about it. It's Sooty, Sweep, and Sue, isn't it? And that's it. And that's the way it shall be. But no, really enjoyed Sooty and Co. I think they did a program called Sooty Heights when Sooty and Co finished, which was the gang running a hotel. But I never really got on with that. Sooty and Co was where it ended for me. I then went back and I got a couple of VHSs of the original Sooty show. I say the original show, like the show from the 80s, from a cousin of mine who had them. And they had guest stars like Duncan Goodhue and Jeff Capes, Bonnie Langford, people like that. And I watched those over and over again as well and really enjoyed those. Although I used to be a bit scared of Jeff Capes, it has to be said.
Oh, yeah, no shame in that. He's terrifying.
Exactly.
Well, you've hit your stride big time now. You're a full gallop.
Thank you very much. Well, it might come to a crashing halt here. Because speaking of being terrified, I now have to talk about a show which I can't remember watching, and it was probably because I thought it was too scary for me. And it's a show called Tales of the Crypt Keeper.
Tales from the Crypt Keeper.
Which is a Canadian cartoon, and it was based on the American program, obviously Tales from the Crypt. Heavily sanitized version, consumption of children, obviously. It's a children's cartoon. Interestingly, it was cancelled in Canada on the 10th of December 1994, which was my 6th birthday. So a little bit of a link there, but still being shown here the following summer. So clearly ITV still have the rights to some episodes. Yeah, and it's as it sounds. It's an animated version of stories from Tales from the Crypt, which I don't really remember. I can't remember if my mum, didn't let me watch it because she thought I'd be too sensitive. I don't know. But it's not one I can remember an awful lot about. So I would like to, in this slot, if I could, talk about a different American import program to CITV, which I did really enjoy, if I could. And that's the only time I'm going to deviate here.
Oh, that's fair enough.
But I feel like I've got grounds to do that. So CITV did have shows from America and Canada quite regularly. They would buy them in. Sabrina the Teenage Witch being probably the biggest and most well-known of those. But one that I really enjoyed, and it's a character that we've spoken about before. I think I chose it as my favourite series of children's books. It's the Garfield and Friends cartoon.
Ladies and gentlemen, Garfield and Friends. Friends are there.
To help you get started, to give you a push on your way.
Friends are there.
To turn you around, get your feet on the ground for a brand new day.
To pick you up when you're down.
Which I really, really enjoyed. I was a big fan of Garfield at the time. I still am. And there was an extra cartoon in there called Orson's Farm, which I think they created especially for the TV program, which just concerned a load of farm animals living on a farm, and their leader was a pig called Orson, which I also really enjoyed. And yeah, the Garfield and Friends cartoon was always one I looked out for, just because I was a big fan of Garfield in any case. And then that then saddled my dad with the unenviable job of reading my Garfield books and annuals to me, but doing the voices of the characters from the cartoon, which he wasn't altogether great at. And I will let him listen to this and get in touch with us and let us know what he thinks of my summation of that, or even if he remembers it, I don't know. But if we need to talk about an American import, I would go for Garfield and Friends, definitely.
Nice one, yeah. I think I can sort of hear Garfield's voice from that. So I must remember, I must have watched it. And I would have done, because I did have Garfield books. I was a fan of myself. Mm-hmm. So I'm definitely happy for you to substitute that in. I would probably have switched over myself for that. So
thank you.
I'm all for it.
I think the format used to be there'd be a Garfield cartoon, then an Orson's Farm, and then another Garfield. So I think there were three, like sort of 3 or 4 minute cartoons in the program.
Yeah.
With an Orson's Farm in the middle. So yeah, no, really used to like that. So then we move on to the final program in the CITV transmission for today. And this was up there again at the top of my list. And it's How To. Now, I'm really glad we get to talk about How To. I don't think it gets enough credit, How To, I've got to be honest. And the episode I watched on YouTube when having a look back was right in that 90s pomp of the programme. It had been running for a long time by then, and Fred Dinage had been on it since the start, I think. It had been running since the 1970s, I think.
I think from the 60s.
Yeah,
first one, I
a
think
long
was-
time.
Yeah.
So it had already been on TV for sort of 25 years at least by then. We've got TV's own Mr. Combe over Fred Dinage. We've got Gareth Gaztop Jones and his massive earring, and Carol Vorderman in her absolute countdown prime. And the studio was just a complete white sort of void. There was no backdrop. They had props around them to demonstrate the things that they were gonna show, but it was just in the sort of how-to void that they presented the show from, which was excellent. I really enjoyed watching that again. One of the elements of the program that I'd forgotten about, and it stirred a memory, was that when I watched the credits, there are, as the credits roll, on one half of the screen there are the credits for the program, and then on the other half of the screen there are text boxes that go past really quickly while the captions are running. And the idea was that if you wanted to know more about or be reminded of how to do the things that were shown in the program, you could record the program, watch it back, and then pause on the correct caption and read it later on. Yeah. So that was all there. The memory it stirred in me was that I once watched a how-to episode after school, and there was something on there that I was really interested in and wanted to record the details of. So I rushed and found a tape, put it in, recorded it, and later found out that my dad had recorded like a 2-hour James Bond documentary that had been on ITV the night before on there that he was really looking forward to watching that evening. And I'd recorded about 2 minutes of how-to over it. It was presented by Jonathan Ross. I remember that much. And he was very, very upset about that. But, I found out how to make the bottle rocket or whatever it was. And probably never even did after all that. So again, sorry, Dad, for that. Now, I sent you a link before the recording.
Yes, you did.
Because there were a couple of incidental points that came out of my research of how-to that I wanted you to focus on and give me your response to. So the first thing actually is not related to how-to at all. It's an advert. The video that I watched had the adverts and continuity left in there, which is really what we're interested in here at It'll Be Alright in the 90s HQ, to get that full picture of how it went out on the day. And there was an interesting advert there that I'd never seen before, and I just wanted to get your opinion on it. So press play when you're ready and let me know what you think.
Every year, hundreds of young men endure countless hours of deadly, tedious, mind-numbing boredom.
But for the next few weeks, Snickers offer you the chance to win one of 1,000 pairs of Adidas Predators, the football boots that give you more power, more swerve and more control. So please, check out a Snickers bar today.
And maybe scenes like this will be a thing of the past.
So it's a Snickers advert in which you can win a pair of Adidas Predators. Am I right?
I know, it's brilliant, isn't it?
I've never seen it before myself, I don't think.
No, I know.
And that the goalkeeper is a young Matthew McFadden, isn't it? From Succession, one of the most famous actors in the world now.
Is it really?
Yeah, that's him, isn't it?
I've got to be honest with you. I thought it was Charlie Brooker to begin with. But I didn't know it was somebody even more famous than that, with apologies to Charlie Brooker.
It is Matthew McFadden. For
wow.
Sure. We'll put this on. We'll put a link to it at least in the episode description. Something I've also been doing recently with the last episode, viewers may have noticed this. I have actually started putting some videos into the YouTube version of the episode, so I'll put it in there as well. If you're watching that, open up that window as you listen, and you'll see it. But that's a great advert with a huge Hollywood actor in his early days.
Amazing. The other thing is towards the end of the video, and we are actually talking about how-to now. So if you go to 26 minutes and 12 seconds. So this is the portion of the episode we were just talking about where the credits roll, but also you have the captions coming up, giving you further information about the things that have been discussed in the program. But what I want you to do, and we will actually play this in on the episode as well for the benefit of the listeners, I want you to listen to the voiceover by the continuity announcer.
And that's
How for now? 2, 3, 4. Take your break.
On last week's episode of How To, we suggested that it's the custom in some Arab countries to burp as a sign of appreciation after a meal. We now accept that although widely reported, this is actually untrue. Sorry about that.
I mean, what can you say? I like that they're honest and they made a mistake and they can hold their hands up and say, look, we made a dreadful mistake about part of the world, a different culture in the Middle East.
Absolutely, it's good to see How To owning up to their mistakes, definitely, and we're very proud of them for that.
Yeah, good, honest kids TV.
What more could you ask for? And there it ends. That is the schedule for Wednesday, the 12th of July, 1995, over and done with on CITV. So, to recap, we began with Alphabet Castle, moved on to Wizardora, then we went to the Warner Brothers cartoon, Sooty & Co., Tales from the Crypt Keeper, and then finally How To. So I think that's a really good range of programs there. I know that there are going to be a few that you want to speak about from your own memories that we haven't discussed here because of the way that we've structured the episode. So give us a flavour of your favourites from CITV in the 90s.
Well, I had 3 here, and the number 1 I had on my list was How To, because, I mean, you've said so much already. I don't want to repeat you, but it was definitely one of the programs I switched over for. Fred Dinage, who I always mixed up with Fred Dibner. I think maybe Britain's most famous steeplejack. Always mixed them up, but Fred Dinage is a fantastic TV presenter who's still with us. But it's perfectly straddled that line between education and entertainment, didn't it? I bet parents loved this because it was so easy to watch. Just watching an episode, I was watching the first ever episode of How To from 1990 before we started recording tonight. And it's hard to stop watching because it's just snappy and the presenters are great and what they're talking about is really fascinating. It's like a kid's version of QI, kind of, but yeah, even snappier than that. So I do recommend viewers go and have a look on YouTube and just find the random episode because you'll be entertained and educated even as an adult. So go and check it out. So that would have been one I was going to talk about.
I said earlier that How To doesn't get the credit it deserves, and I didn't really say why when I started talking about the episode, but I think you just summed it up perfectly there. So thank you for that.
The second program I wanted to talk about was Woof. This ran from 1989 to 1997, so full 90s. And I was really surprised that this wasn't CBBC because I did watch this all the time and I just assumed it was children's BBC, but it wasn't. It was CITV. And I don't remember a huge amount about the storylines, but the premise is it's a boy who will turn into a dog at random moments throughout his day. It was just a great premise, a fun premise, you know. One of those things where you think, what would it be like? A little bit like Bernard's Watch or those sort of things where you put yourself in the position of the main character. So I definitely enjoyed that. And then the third program I want to talk about is Finders Keepers from 1991 to 96, a big CITV program, I think, presented by Neil Buchanan, one of the best kids presenters of his era for sure. So this was a game show where kids had to ransack a house, like a prop house, to find clues to win prizes. I think almost anyone of our age would have watched it. I think there's an American version as well. I can't remember what it's called, but viewers from across the pond will also have seen their own version of it. This sort of sums up CITV for me, I think, because it felt slightly dangerous. It was dangerous television because it felt like TV for the naughty kids almost. It was doing something that you would get into massive trouble for doing, but you always sort of secretly would like to do, which is just ransacking your house, like throwing everything everywhere without a care in the world and just going crazy, basically. And it unsettled me. It did make me feel almost uncomfortable, a bit intimidated. I think because I was such a shy, quiet kid at school who was terrified of the naughty kids. And this was like a program for the naughty kids. It was a program that was naughty kids just trashing a house, you know. So it felt weird. Like it was probably the sort of thing my parents didn't want me to watch. But they obviously didn't stop me because I did see it every now and again. it was like the TV equivalent of just eating as many sweets as you can, and it was like dazzling to witness, but it felt like I shouldn't be watching it. So it was, I think, a good representation of ITV and how I viewed ITV at the time. But it was like Funhouse. It was just, you desperately yearned to be doing that and to be on it. So that they were my three, and of course you've chosen How To already because it was so good.
If you were ever lucky enough to get on a program like Finders Keepers or Funhouse, I suppose the closest BBC relation to that would be something like Get Your Own Back, maybe.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. But you really won the jackpot as a kid if you've got onto one of those shows, haven't you? I mean, absolutely brilliant. Just one thing on Woof. I hope that kid grew out of that and it stopped happening because, if I'm at Leigh Delamere Services just about to come off the motorway with my wife of the pod in the car, and then I suddenly turn into a Labrador, can you imagine the havoc that would cause?
No.
So we can't have that, can we?
No. The M4 motorway is getting closures left, right, and centre enough as it is without drivers getting turned into labradoodles and whatnot. One thing I quickly wanted to say that I didn't like about CITV was Tots TV and Rosie and Jim. Both of those programs did my head in. The characters I could not get on board with at all. And Rosie and Jim, the theme tune still comes into my head about once every 48 hours. So that's a reason to dislike it. But
sailing along on the old ragdoll.
Well, I have a friend called Tim, Big Tim Parker, and also another friend called Stephen Rose, so we all call Rosie. So it was too easy at school to sing the theme tune, Rosie and Tim, to that.
I've never thought of that. That's brilliant.
It's good, yeah. But the theme tune, it was such an earworm. But the characters just, I was not into them at all. The Tots TV, good God. But I don't want to be too negative. So they were just my quick downers to CITV that I wanted to throw in there.
Just before we finish, one brief mention of the time that I wrote in to a CITV programme, hoping to be invited to take part. And this was to a short-lived programme called Sticky, which was on a Friday afternoon. And this was when, in the later 90s, when CITV began putting shows like Sticky. There was one called Delicious. The most famous one is probably Mad for It, which was hosted by a guy called Mike McLean. And it was like a Friday afternoon sort of talent contest, gunging, but also features and competitions, like a Saturday morning show, but on a Friday afternoon, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
But anyway, on Sticky, one of the presenters one Friday did like an obstacle course where he climbed over some things and jumped on a rope and smashed through some sugar glass and did some barrel rolls and then did all this stuff. And I desperately wanted to have a go on that obstacle course. So I wrote into the program asking to be allowed to try it. And they did write back to me, and they sent me a Sticky sticker. So I got a sticker with the logo of the program, but I can't find any evidence of the program on the internet anywhere. I mean, there's nothing on YouTube. There's not a lot comes up when you just use search engines to search for it. So if anybody out there remembers Sticky, with Jez Edwards, I think was one of the presenters who we might have mentioned before on the pod. But please let me know if you remember Sticky as well. We've come to the end of our mini CITV Odyssey, and I need to know, Alex, have I done enough to convince you that CITV is worthy?
I mean, you know what, Stu? I think you probably have, to be honest. I can't. It would just feel wrong, I think, to say I hadn't changed my mind to some extent, at least. I think CITV is, I think you've argued your case supremely well, and it's made me want to watch a number of programs that you've referenced and seek out some more, dig around on YouTube and watch some more episodes of some of these programs. So, yeah, to be honest, I think you've done it. I think CITV is in my good books. I'm not going to say it's better than CBBC. I mean, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to say it's as good as, but I would happily spend an afternoon, flicking between the two. I would flick between the two. And that's more than I thought going into this episode. So I think you've done a good job.
Well, if it's gone up in your estimation, then I can only say that I'm happy with my evening's work. And maybe it's something we can come back to.
Well, I'll tell you what, Stu, I have a proposal for you and the listener. We always want your input on this, so we can disregard it.
The one listener.
I think I should dig out the CBBC schedule for the same week, the 12th of July, 1995, and I'll do exactly what you've just done, but CBBC, and then we can compare directly our two kids channels and see what comes out on top.
Yes, please. I am up for that.
Good. It's settled. Well, that wraps up our court case on whether CITV was as good as CBBC, and I think we have been, I don't know, were you acquitted or were you a successful defence? I don't know.
Well, I mean, that's the same thing, isn't it?
Yes, you're right, it is. Were you, was I prosecuted or were you acquitted? I don't know. One of those things. I think CITV was acquitted.
I think we've needlessly confused things.
I have. That's not likely. Right, well, that wraps it up anyway. It was well argued, and we have a good result. And we've also just had an idea just born out of it. So it's nice when content just, bursts out of an existing idea.
Yeah, comes out of the 90s atmosphere and lands in our laps. So, yeah, no, really looking forward to doing that, mate. And thank you for listening to my case and being open-minded to the evidence I put before you.
I'm sort of wishing we had made more of the court case sort of analogy and added in some amusing sound effects here and there of like gavels and stuff. But, you live and you learn. Maybe we can do that for the CBBC one.
Well, why don't you do that anyway? And then the listeners will realise why we've done it when they get to this part of the episode.
That's true. This is world of post-production, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll see if I can be bothered. If you were a big fan of CITV back in the day and you have some thoughts on it, your favourite programmes, anything we've missed out, something you would put in the case for the prosecution or defence or whatever it is, then please do let us know in the usual places. You can find all our social media links on our link tree, which is linked to below. So please do get in touch. Of course, you can get in touch about anything else we've talked about ever on this podcast, or give us any ideas for what's the most 90s or anything like that. So please do get in touch. For the next episode, we're hoping to piggyback on the Juggernaut, which is the Beckham documentary on Netflix at the moment. We are going to do an episode on Beckham and the Beckhams as a family with returning guests, we hope, Kate Pro, legend of the pod, Kate Pro. Mm-hmm. And that promises to be an exciting episode with plenty of 90s pop references and sports references and all those sort of things. So that should be a good one.
Brilliant. And while we're talking football, just before we go, it's a big hello to our latest social media follower, Colin the Braveheart Hendry himself. Can you believe that?
Unbelievable. Premier League winner. Fantastic.
He played in the World Cup against Brazil.
I mean, for goodness sake. Neither of us have done that, have we?
No. I scored a couple of goals in the Chippenham and District Sunday Football League, but that's about as far as it goes.
Eat that, Colin Hendry.
If you're listening, Colin, we would obviously love to have you on, so please do get in touch.
Absolutely, yes. But until next time, when we will be curling it round the wall from 25 yards with our Adidas Predator boots on, it's goodbye from me. I'm just off to dig out the bronchial balsam to ease my obvious cold that I'm trying to disguise poorly.
It's goodbye from me. I'm just off to find a mop head so I can pretend to be Tatty Bogle like I did all those years ago.
Come into our social media channels before you know it. Cheerio.
Tatty bye. Hear it, it'll be right in the 90s HQ to get that full. Bless you.
I am recovering from a cold. It seems to be coming back as this episode goes on.
It's that dusty 1995 how to.
Yeah, exactly.